Hello, Sarah with Melting Star Handmade here. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make this cute tiny dinosaur for yourself, or you can just watch to enjoy how I do it. If you wanted to make this tiny dinosaur for yourself, you can use the free pattern by Choly. I will put her pattern link in the video description, so you can find this free pattern for yourself. You can also check out Choly's other sewing patterns. She has a lot of free ones and a lot of ones that you can pay for, and they are great patterns. They're easy to follow along with. I'm making this video just for a little extra visual aid on how to make this for yourself. And if you do want to make this along with me, make sure you get the things on this material list before you get started. And you can pause the video anytime you want to make sure that you are understanding everything that needs to be done. And I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you in advance for watching. I hope that you enjoy this. By now you should have printed out your pattern pieces. They're the last three of the PDF. You'll want to take the first two and tape them together. Use the diamond and put tape. Make sure you put it right on where the dino is, because we will be cutting him out and we want him to stay together. So then you cut it out on the solid lines. These face pieces you set aside. And then when you come across a triangle, I like to cut the other way. It helps line things up right here. Let's skip to when I'm done cutting all this out. You can always pause if you need to. Now that we have everything cut out, we're going to put the pieces in the piles of the colors we're going to do. I'm going to do light blue for the main body, so that's the stomach, the feet, and the face. And for the spikes, I'm going to do a darker blue. Let's get our fabric. I got the fabric. I have this lighter blue and more of a medium blue here. I'm going to cut these out using air erase marker, some pins, and scissors, of course. When cutting out, you do want to pay attention to your stretch and your nap. With the spikes, it doesn't say, so I just like to point them down so the nap is going up. So my nap on this is going down, and my stretch is going across the top of the spike. I folded it over so I could cut two out at the same time, and it would be a mirroring pair. I pinned it together, and I'm going to cut it out like that. You can also cut this out in different ways. This does say that you want to cut out 10 spikes, so it'll be 5 pairs. And I'll do that off camera. So I'm going to set that aside and we'll work on the main body. Again, you want to pay attention to your stretch and your nap. I'm going to move that for a second, figure out my stretch and which my nap is going. So I always have my nap facing down on the camera, and the stretch goes across. So you could see it was more stretchy that way. So now I'm going to line this up and hold it down while I trace it, or pin it. Pin it is better because it's a very large piece. It's hard to hold down the whole time and keep it in the correct position. Or you could just cut it out while it's pinned as well, as long as you pin it well enough. Make sure that you're not going off any edges. And you finished this with all of your pieces, including the feet. Make sure you always check how many pieces of what you need to cut out. There's 1 of the main body. You want to do 8 of the feet because there are 4 feet. So you have to have matching pairs. And then 1 of the body. So I'm going to skip to when I have everything cut out. Now that I have everything cut out, I like to just double check that I have cut out the right amount of things. So I'm just counting my pieces. And now we can get ready to cut out the get the pieces ready for the face. You have 2 options for the mouth. You can do the little one or the bigger one. I'm going to choose to do the littler one. So I'm going to set my pieces aside that I don't need at this time, and we're going to focus on the face pieces. You want to have your fusible web. I like to use Heat and Bond. There's also Wonder Under, but the main thing is it is a adhesive that has a paper backing. It does not have a fabric backing. and you have to make sure it is a light sewable if you're going to sew it on. There are heavy duties that you can just put on and they don't need to be sewed. I've had bad experience with them. They don't like to stick. They start to come off. But anyway, you start with the paper side up and you trace your pieces that you need. You'll need 2 eyes and 1 mouth for this tiny dino. Now we can cut this away from our main heat and bond. I like to trim away the excess little pieces because it'll overhang your fabric and possibly get your iron or your ironing board sticky. So now we do need our iron and our ironing board out. Make sure you preheat your iron on a cotton setting. For my applique fabric, I will be using this black felt. It's a nice quality felt and it looks good on the end. For the next step, you'll also want a pressing cloth. I just have this piece of muslin that I like to use. Just a scrap piece of fabric that's cotton would work. So just iron this straight on to your felt piece. Make sure it's on the back of your piece. And then you iron it on, holding for a few seconds while you move it around, and make sure it's fully adhered. And once it's cooled down, you can cut it out. You just follow the lines that you originally drew and cut them all out. I'm going to skip to when they're fully cut out. Now that you have all your pieces cut out, grab your main body piece and your main fabric pattern piece. We will use this to line it up. You remove the paper backing. You hold the piece over the paper and pull the paper away as you continue to hold it. And you can see it lines it up pretty well. So you repeat this with all 3. Just slowly move that paper away or it's going to pull the piece with it. And for the mouthpiece, it didn't have this little mouth, so I just made sure I centered it as best as I could. I think my dogs are freaking out, but anyway, you just hold it and you can adjust it. It doesn't have to be exactly where it was on the paper pattern, as long as it looks good for you, and I think that looks great. Now that this is all ironed on, we can put our ironing board and our iron away and get our sewing machine out to start sewing this. For this applique stitch, I'm doing a satin stitch. I'm setting my machine to a zigzag and it has a stitch length of 0.5 and a zigzag of 3.5. You want to make sure that the needle will land on the black and then onto the blue, back and forth as tight as it can go. And if that zigzag satin stitch is too difficult for you, you can do a wider zigzag or you could do a straight stitch. It doesn't matter as long as it is something that you can do and it looks good to you. I'm going to speed this up so you can see the end results for mine. You can see this looks nice and clean. So we'll repeat this for all 3 pieces. The mouth is the hardest, so make sure you go really slow on that one, and I'll skip to when all 3 of these are sewn. Now I'm going to add the eye shines. She does not have their placement on this paper pattern, so I'm just going to use this puffy paint and use this picture as a reference on where to place them. In the instructions, she does have this at the very end, but I like to add it now so I can let it dry, so I can give my stuffed animal a hug as soon as it's done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some scrap felt and clean the tip of the puffy paint off and make sure it's flowing correctly. And once I'm happy with the flow, I'm going to guess where to place the dot and just make sure it's got a nice big circle and it's in the right place, and kind of put the next one on there. And then this does say to let it dry for 4 hours, so I will skip ahead to when this is dry. Now that the face is done, we're going to sew these darts on the edge. You fold it over and you keep sewing to make the darts a nice smooth transition. And you do this on both side darts. You do not want to do the middle. We want to save the middle for the next step so that we can add the spikes. So again, do not sew right there. So we're going to set this aside and we're going to get all of our spikes out. We want to make sure that we change the color of our thread if we want it to match. Sometimes if you use minky, you can't see it through as well. Me using anti-pill fleece, you can see the brighter thread through the darker fabric. Now we're going to take our spikes and make sure that they have right sides facing each other and they're matching pairs. And I'm going to clip them together, leaving the top open for turning. There are a total of 5 spikes, so you should have 10 pieces that you are clipping together in matching pairs. Now that these are all clipped, we can sew them together. We, again, need to make sure that we leave one end open for turning, and it is the longest, flattest side. So I do these one right after another without even cutting the thread. It does save thread, and it helps the machine not try and eat the fabric. So I'm going to skip ahead to when all of these are sewed. Now that we have all of these sewn, we're going to want to double check their seams, make sure we didn't miss anything, make sure we didn't go too far off the edge on any parts, and then cut them apart. Once you are happy with your seams, you can take your sharp scissors and trim the seams. We trim this extra fabric away to make sure that they lay better, they're not bulky or bunched up, and the spikes are actually more defined if we cut this away. You of course want to make sure you're not accidentally cutting the thread when you're trimming them. Once they're all trimmed, make sure you turn them all the right side out. I am using hemostats. This part is not required to use hemostats. You could always just use a chopstick. Once they are all turned, we're going to sew them to the body. To start, I did change my thread back to the body color so that it matches better and you don't see it through the seams. To help us find the placement for the spikes, we can use the pattern image that Choly provides for us. You can see on the pattern image that it has a placement for the spikes between the forehead and down the back. You hold it up and then you place your spike. You do want to have it turned in, and then to put just a straight stitch to hold it in place temporarily. Also make sure you don't backstitch. This makes it easier, so if you place it wrong, it's easier to take the threads out and place it in a new spot. So we are going to find the placement for all of these spikes down the back. Continue basting them on, and I will skip ahead till when they're all basted. Once all the spikes are basted on, we can start sewing the body. I'm going to clip from the tail down to the front of the forehead. And I like to line the seams up. It helps it look neater. And make sure that you are going to sew over the spikes carefully. You go kind of slow. For my machine, I tend to have to switch to a straight stitch to go over the thick spikes when I'm doing fleece because it is a thicker fabric. Just take your time, and when you get to the forehead, you want to do a dart so it has a nice curve to it, a nice transition. Once I had the tail to the forehead sewed, I liked to take just some time to check the seams, make sure everything was sewed properly, and trim some of the threads that came through. Our next step is to sew the feet. We're going to take our little pieces, make sure their right sides are facing each other, and clip them together with making sure to leave the top open for turning. And it's the flat side for the top. We're going to sew these all around, leaving the one side open for turning, like I said. And I'm going to skip ahead to when all of the little feet are sewed. Now that the feet are sewn, I'm just going to double check the stitching and make sure I didn't miss anything. I'm going to cut them apart, and then I will do the same like I did with the spikes. With my sharp scissors, I will go around and trim all this little extra fabric away so that they lay nice. Once we're done with that, we can turn them right side out with our hemostats or with just a chopstick. With this next step, she does not mention stuffing them. I left them unstuffed because the instructions said to leave them unstuffed. If you were to stuff them, just make sure you would stuff them very, very lightly. Alright, now we're going to find the placement for these feet. I'm going to use the pattern image, hold it over my body piece, put the feet in place, and slide the paper away, and clip them to the body. I'm going to do this with all 4 feet. You just use the little line markers on the pattern image, and it helps very well to figure out where the feet go. And then we're going to straight stitch or baste stitch these feet into place so they don't move around in our next step. Once we have the feet base stitched on, we are going to add the body piece to the back piece. The belly piece to the back piece. What we'll do is we'll line up those little triangles we made and clip those first, and then the very back seam we want to line up to the tail. And we're going to just kind of clip everything along. You want to leave an opening in a part of the back tail so that you have a hole for turning and a hole for stuffing. I'm just going to mark where I open it or leave it open with double clips. And then we sew all the way around. Make sure you sew the feet between these pieces of fabric so that they're secured. Sometimes if your sewing machine does not want to do a zigzag stitch over multiple layers, switching to a straight stitch can help. And well, like I said, we'll just sew all the way around this, leaving that opening. Now that I've sewn all the way around the body except for the opening, I like to check my stitches to make sure I didn't miss anything or things didn't slide around. And then we can turn it the right side out and see how it looks. I'm just going to clip any threads that come through, and it looks good to me, so I'm going to start stuffing it. I'm just using regular polyfill, but if you have any scrap fabric or anything like that to stuff it, you're able to do that as well. So what you want to do is you want to start with stuffing the face and make sure that you have stuffed it to the point where there's no more wrinkles in the fabric. And then you work your way down the body towards the tail as you stuff. Make sure that you're just making sure there's no wrinkles in it and the shape looks good. Once you get close to the opening, then that's when you can start stuffing the back of the tail so that everything is fully stuffed. As you can see, I just shoved some in the back of the tail, and then just make sure if there's no holes, everything looks good, and then when we're ready, we can start ladder stitching this shut. For the ladder stitching, you'll want to use some thread with a knot in the end and a hand needle. If you are not familiar with ladder stitching, I do have a diagram to help you with this part, and there are plenty of YouTube videos also showing you how to ladder stitch. I'm going to finish ladder stitching this shut. I do like to sew it shut one time, make sure that it is laying well, and then go back and forth a few times just to make sure it's very secure, but I'm going to skip ahead. Now that it's ladder stitched shut and it's nice and secure, we can tie this off and hide the knot inside the seam. Once we clip this thread, he is finished. He's quite easy to make and very cute. If you liked my video, make sure you click that like button and subscribe so that you can be notified when I make more sewing tutorials. Thank you for watching.